Ahwefo ema yeho akwaba asem kese so ana yedu na sede da yoyo no edu asem kese a yetam asem kese eto ho na yedi hu nkomo na watching ye share mo say yede the Passion Week version of the month of the motherland 𝗟𝗡𝗡. And this morning we are seated to discuss matters of Easter. We know that Easter is an Anglo-Saxon rendition of the Aramaic word Pascha or the Hebrew word Passage. But the Yenimune say Easter actually is the Resurrection Sunday. How have we come and how do we end on this Resurrection Sunday? To do this discussion with me is a very prominent teacher of ours. This man I'm about to introduce is the occupant of the 𝗦𝗏 Professorial Chair of African Christianity and Pentecostalism Charismatic Theology. He is a visiting professor to Harvard, to Princeton, to Asbury Theological Seminary. More importantly to us, he is the president of the Trinity Theological Seminary and also a minister, for that matter, a senior minister of the Methodist Church Ghana. Dear friends, let's welcome the very Reverend Professor 𝗟𝗏𝗏 Asamoah Dzedu, also from Akwaba.
That's it.
Good to have you, sir.
Thank you. You seem to be very happy this morning.
Oh, well, it's part of the job, you know.
In other words, your happiness is fake happiness.
You know, it's real happiness.
Oh, okay.
It's real happiness.
Okay. But there was some interesting thing. When you were introducing the program, you spoke tree. But when it came to passion, you used the English. What's the tree for passion?
Amanhun.
I don't know one kind of say. Amanhun is suffering.
Okay.
It's not passion.
Okay. And then you
I don't know. You are the host of the program.
It's a two questions now. All right. We are grateful to have you said. We are looking at the chronicles of the Easter story. So for Easter crash, where have we come from?
I came from Trinity.
So let's start from Trinity.
I don't know where you came from. Well, I'd like to greet all our viewers and to thank God for bringing us to another Easter season. I think that it is a season that calls for a lot of sober reflection on our faith and also our personal and collective works with God. Se yura emirati say mo na ete say yeto ye boase yadwen ye gidi hu yadwen afra onyankopon de afra na meka fra menka fra se eye asofo fra nko a ya ye boy Yesu Kristo de nyina Yesu Kristo afra yen ti sa brain ye de si hwa ye de dwendwen ne fra hu ene senia ye bobo bra de ahye na ne onyam na dwuma so akoso. So the Easter period, if I disregard the name, begins with the resurrection. Because the resurrection was the climax of what we call the Christ event. Saint here.
So the climax is beginning the story.
Exactly. So you begin with the resurrection backwards.
Okay.
Because you talk about the resurrection and then you tell us why the resurrection occurred.
Okay.
It occurred in order for God in Christ to prove that as far as he's concerned, evil will never have the last word. So even in the scriptures, death is described as an enemy. But in the resurrection, we see that our arch enemy, the devil, hasn't gotten the last word on anything. So we travel from trauma to tragedy to triumph. Trauma because the suffering of Jesus was very traumatic. Mfansifo waka se bi a waka se asem bi to na asem no mu yeduru ohyewoda waka de nekra egwan. It has no English equivalent, but literally your soul runs away. Something like that. So it is traumatic. Some people, when they are traumatized, can descend into depression. The story of Jesus was very traumatic because you find that even the people around him seem to have misunderstood what he was about in the world. I would say not even his mother Mary understood. So it was traumatic for everybody. It was traumatic for Jesus himself. It was traumatic for the people around him. Let me give you a quick example. And we did refer to this during the Christmas period. Yeah. It's when Jesus was taken into the temple. And you know, the people who received him in the temple as a baby, as an infant, included Simeon and Anna. And Simeon is the one who took Jesus in his arms and sort of prophetically declared that his eyes were beholding God's salvation. And then he said a number of things. Then in his concluding statement, Simeon turns to Mary and says to Mary, "And a sword will pierce your soul." It's a statement that we don't quote often. But that statement defines a lot of things that happened around Jesus.
Maybe even for Mary, he really, because of the joy at the moment, did not think about it.
That's why I said earlier on, I don't even know whether Mary knew.
Okay.
So a sword will pierce your soul.
Yeah.
There were things that happened in Jesus' life that would have been difficult for a mother to take. Maybe a scene as it's name or to come to terms with it. Senia Pharisee no edidi na tem. Do baby kra me kind of fansa what's Jesus or itumfur. Mo kind of say asante mo kind of say.
Otutrenia na.
Tumfur, somebody who eats too much.
A glutton. A glutton. Edidi Polo.
Sanya wini ma die bi a we bi. You know. All right. So, and then even when he had cast out demons, they said exactly. All these were difficult. Okay. But the trauma that virtually destroyed Mary was when she saw her son crucified on the cross.
Okay, sir. So now Jesus is on the cross, but I want to chronologically see where the whole story started from. Now, back on some shasi fi. He says, "Ye di Easter near cross near ko eye owu sorry." And the Easter near fan the shasi fi yenko.
If we are talking about the Easter story, you cannot help but begin from the old covenant.
Okay.
You cannot help.
All right.
Especially Genesis chapter 2, I think verse 15, where it says that the serpent will strike the heel of the man, and the man will strike his head. You see, we take that as the beginning of the gospel. You see, and we take it that it is in Jesus that the serpent, if you like, bites the heel of the man and his head is struck. And those of us who have watched Mel Gibson's film The Passion would see that he uses that imagery. It's a very, very powerful imagery. So we can't talk about Easter, the resurrection, without beginning from
the beginning.
Without beginning from the intervention of evil in the history of salvation, what we call the human predicament. And the human predicament, or the fall, is when the serpent instigated Adam and Eve to rebel against the authority of God. So this whole story of salvation begins with creation, with God's purpose, the destructive nature of evil, and God's historic agenda to undo what evil has done. You know, so at every point in the history of God's people, you see how evil tries to undermine God's purpose. We see it in the story of Abraham. We see it in the captivity in Egypt. We see it in the release when they instituted the Passover. On their way out of the place, the nations they had to fight. We see it everywhere. You know, so what it means is that whatever God is doing, evil seems to be lurking close by. Bibiara onyame eyewo ni wiase ya brabom ya setenem no ubehwe na obonefo ne teho baby pese osay no, because evil is destructive. So Easter is a symbol of the fact that in Christ, the head of evil, the serpent, was crushed.
So, Prof, all of a sudden, Jesus on age 33 is triumphantly entering into Jerusalem. And I had seen some commentators say...
that's according to you.
Okay.
The triumphantly is according to you.
According to me, yes.
From Jesus' point of view...
It wasn't triumphantly. All right. So that's why I mentioned some commentators. Maybe including me. So all of a sudden, Jesus is entering into Jerusalem, knowing that he is going to die. And as you rightly said, he's entering knowing that it is beginning a certain journey to the cross. Jesus is in Jerusalem now. We will call it Palm Sunday.
Palm Sunday.
All right, so that is also actually for a year Palm Sunday. Ya make one say we no na etwegui. Etina eye kwesi de etwemu de ye nyina ye Methodist for ne sorry aka nyina na ne oziana Yesu na ekoi. Prof said triumphant ne de ye ne de aka ho na so Yesu twirimu de bi na enye triumphant sa. Ti Yesu Kristo do en we wura eye krokronkron mu Jerusalem said ye odifo Isaiah eshkan pepepe. So for say.
And I said we Yesu your brony to do.
We infoni dia
when my obi say yes sir yes that togwe Adzika go father but anyway I mean in a sense it is not wrong to call it triumphant.
Okay. Because
you see history is usually narrated and presented by those who are observing it. So for those of us who were observing that history,
that is a reportage.
He entered Jerusalem triumphantly.
Yeah.
But remember that along the line he wept. And actually passed judgment on Jerusalem. That I have been meaning to gather you under my protection, my wings, as a hen gathers its chicken under her wings, and you did not let me. It was a journey of confusion. It was a journey of uncertainty. It was a journey that became tragic. So I have used 3 words this morning.
Uncertainty.
Trauma,
Okay.
tragedy, and triumph.
Okay.
In order for you not to forget, that's why I used all the T.
Okay.
Because
The T's.
Matisse old school now.
Miss Odia because St. Peter's so I joined in Gwetia. The only boys school in Ghana.
Yeah, St. Peter's was a big school.
Yeah. Oh, bro. And I said, yes.
All right. So
the T's again, the trauma, the tragedy,
and the triumph.
All right. All right.
So the trauma was the pain. The tragedy was the crucifixion of the truth. And sometimes we limit the crucifixion of the truth to just a certain aspect of Jesus' life. But even in our world today, nobody, or let me say most people, have a problem dealing with the truth.
Most people.
If you stand for the truth, you'll be hated. If you stand for the truth, you'll be excluded. Because we want the opportunity, the spaces to do things our way. The human propensity to do things negatively and to follow evil is very, very high. You see, so it's not simply the Pharisees, the Pilates, and the Herods. It's also us. But anyway, so just in Jerusalem. Yeah. And one of my favorite aspects of that whole journey to Jerusalem begins from just before that entry. It's when James and John came to ask for places in the kingdom. That is what tells me that after 3 years, the disciples had still not really come to terms with Isaiah 53. Of why Jesus came, the stories of the suffering servant. So they come to ask for glory. When Jesus knew that what lay ahead of him, at least the immediate future, wasn't going to be glorious. There was no beauty or majesty about him that we should desire him. That's what Isaiah says. Yeah. So Jesus enters Jerusalem, and you know the first place he enters? The temple. The temple. And he passes judgment on the temple too. A place of prayer had been converted into a den of robbers. And sometimes our interpretation of that can be a bit problematic. The den is where the people run to, the armed robbers, when they have finished their deals, their escapades. So these are people who pretend to be righteous outside, but who have used the temple as a cover for their misdeeds. So that's why Jesus says, you have turned it into a den of robbers, a place where robbers, in quotes, take refuge. In other words, they used religion to cover up their hypocrisy. That's what Jesus was saying. And if you look at the New Testament, you would find that Paul uses the word temple in 2 ways. He uses the temple to refer to the human body. Your body is a temple. But he also uses it to refer to the church. Don't you know that your body is a temple and God will destroy anybody who destroys his temple? In that context, temple referred not to the body, but to the community. So Paul was saying, if anybody destroys God's community, I will destroy that person. So what Jesus did in entering Jerusalem and what Jesus did in entering Jerusalem and going all the way to the cross was not to be taken as an individualistic journey for us to make demands on God. He said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So Jesus was building a new community, unlike the community he encountered in the temple. So then he goes on. I mean, there was also the story of the fig tree and its barrenness and so on and so forth. All those were symbolic statements. And we come to the day before the crucifixion.
I am fascinated with the Gethsemane experience.
That's right.
Maybe when you finish, you can link it up with the Lord's Supper, which is going to be the last dining. But let's see the episode within the Garden of Gethsemane, which really marks the procedure to the agony. Possibly the pictures Jesus Christ na Gethsemane through.
That's right. So that's part of the trauma. Even the prayer that was offered in agony. Jesus' soul had been traumatized. He was agonizing and wondering. Sometimes you come to situations in life and you wonder whether you made the right decision. Because you seem convinced when you started. But the way things have gone, we are not even sure whether God was in it. It happens to everyone.
Yeah.
Look, sometimes it's marriage.
Sorry, baby, okay, say right. The men family how we show to glorify God.
No.
Yes, sometimes marriage, you say.
Sometimes it's marriage. Sometimes it's a journey you have embarked on. Sometimes it can be a job you have taken. Other times it's somebody you have brought into your space. Like Judas. I brought this person into my space.
Take care of my finances.
To take care of my finances. And he is behaving like Vincent. I know you have been delivered.
Yes.
know, but look, all of us, when the eyes of the master are not upon us, would have a tendency to make wrong choices. And this evening in my reflections at church, I'm going to focus on something that happened at the table.
Yeah, we'll be coming to the table after the Gethsemane. So when we get there, but I want you to focus a little bit on
the Gethsemane. Yes, I was coming to that. That's why I said. That's why I said it was very traumatic.
Good. Yes.
And this is Jesus himself, the one who had said, in response to James and John, that I came not to be served, but to serve and to give my life a ransom for many. What happened between that statement and Gethsemane? And it's a life of disappointments too. Because in your time of agony, you need support.
Surprisingly, the three disciples he went into the garden with were sleeping.
That's what I'm coming to. I have just come from a program in Bolga.
With
Anaba. Pastor 𝗟𝗏𝗏 and the 𝗟𝗏𝗏 ministries. And the main speaker, I was just playing a supportive role, but the main speaker was Pastor 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏. And, you know, about 13, 14 years ago, something tragic happened to the gentleman, my friend, Pastor Eastwood. He lost his daughters tragically in a very terrible accident. And before he introduced his guest speaker, he said 13, 14 years ago when that thing happened, one of the people who came physically to support him in prayer obegyina n'akyi so ne nsɛm ɛne ne bɔ mpaeɛ ɛne n'adamfo yi a wato nsa afrɛ no yi. Nti mmere bi wɔ hɔ a ɛka gyinabea bi a ɛhia obi ma wahyɛ wo dzen, wahyɛ wo nkuran. Mpɛne pii obi bɛka no asɛm kyerɛ mɔbɔ mpaeɛ amɔ mpaeɛ no ayɛ mmɔ. You know? Nti abere a Jesus ka gyina mu na dɛm dzen hyɛ na ohia. Nanso esuafo no ka ebaasa na ɔdze ne nwa to wɔn do no mpo. Na wɔreda. You see?
Yeah.
You can't fault them. They were tired, they were exhausted. They had told this man not to come to Jerusalem because it is going to be tragic.
Maybe he was all powerful and such a thing. Yes, you're all powerful.
That is part of the trauma. That is part of why everybody was traumatized. Because we have seen this man raise the dead. Heal the sick.
Walk on the sea.
Walk on the sea. Open the eyes of the blind. Fed thousands with nothing. And we know that ubia a yew say we a bearman ube sonuma ube action
BBC fansa kan here.
And then the crowd comes to Gethsemane, and this powerful, prayerful man, some even thought it was a magician, who was going to disappear from sight, is arrested. And for a time, it looked as if all his powers had deserted him. We all feel deserted at some point. We all feel deserted. And
especially in leadership positions.
Everybody feels deserted sometimes. And when the psalmist talks about going through the valley of the shadow of death, you know, cancer, and that's what makes the difference. The fact that in all this, Jesus knew that his divine mandate could not be distorted or thwarted.
Not my will, but your will.
But your will be done. And I think that is what is critical for all of us. Accepting the will of God under the most difficult of circumstances. It is not everything that you would say. God is not a God of evil. So God doesn't bring the evil. God is a good God. Say God is a good God.